thank you for tuning in at an hour where that's new for us. I'm thrilled to have you along. I was worried that not everyone would get the message that this one was at noontime, but so thank you for joining us today on kind of an overcast day in Falmouth. If I haven't had the pleasure of making your acquaintance, I'm Mark Schmidt. I'm the Executive Director for the Museums on the Green. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, a couple things. I want to remind you that these lectures are brought to you in part by some help from our friends at Cape Cod 5, First Citizens Federal Credit Union, Martha's Vineyard Savings. We also want to let you know that 8 Cousins Bookseller in Falmouth has copies of all the books, so we hope that you will spend some time with them. And this is being recorded, so I want you to know about that. And also, if you've got a question, down at the bottom, use the chat feature, and we'll do that at the end and ask questions. This may be the easiest introduction I've ever had, because I am absolutely thrilled to have Sophie with us today, and I was really hoping to meet her in person, and I think you all would have as well. Sophie's a women's rights advocate, an author, consultant on war, on women in war. She has multiple degrees, including one from the Yale School of Management, and I'll let her go into her whole biography, because she's it's rather impressive. But Sophie also really wanted to come to Falmouth, and when we first spoke Sophie was over December, January, something like that. She was very much looking forward to coming to Cape Cod because she had never been. And so she, her husband, and her young daughter were going to take a trip to the Northeast. They're going to go to New York City, go to Boston, go to the Cape. Really looking forward to it. Obviously, the pandemic changed some travel plans. But in a quote that I will never forget, because I said, "Are you going to have time to do this?" She says, "Oh yeah, you know, I can come in July. We can go to New York City. I'll let my husband watch my daughter. It's about time he did something, and then I can go and spend time with you." So this is a woman after my own heart. Again, it breaks my heart that I couldn't meet her in person, but through the benefits of Zoom, Sophie, you are our first international lecture, so you get to do this from the Netherlands. So and this is a book that pretty much had me at hello just based on the title, but also with the subject matter. When the book's entitled "Seducing, Killing Nazis," we've been trying to do things on women's history anyway, and everybody knows I love World War II. This is one that she just had me from the jump. So would you welcome Sophie Poldermans?
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here, and yeah, I really wish that it would have been in person, but I'm very happy that we do have these digital means to stay connected all over the world. So good afternoon to all of you. It's evening here, but I'm glad that still, even because of the time difference, we're able to connect. So yeah, just a little bit about myself. My name is Sophie Poldermans. I am Dutch, and I live in Haarlem, which is a city about 12 miles west of Amsterdam. And Haarlem is the same town where the 3 heroines of the book grew up, so it might be interesting. And maybe some of you have been to Haarlem or Amsterdam. If not, I recommend it once this pandemic is over. I'm a lawyer by training, specialized in international criminal law, so war crimes, human rights, I did peace and conflict studies at Berkeley, actually. Yeah, human rights law, women's rights law, and like Mark said, women's leadership from Yale. So that is my professional background in a nutshell. And what I would like to do with you is to go over the book. I have a PowerPoint presentation to share with you the story of these incredible three women, Hannie Schaft and the sisters Truus and Freddie Oversteegen, who joined the armed resistance in the Netherlands in World War II. And I was fortunate to actually know both Oversteegen sisters for 20 years. Had a very close connection with them, a true friendship. And then when Freddie, as the last of these three women, passed away almost 2 years ago, yeah, that her obituary in the Washington Post set off an entire media frenzy. And there was a lot of demand for English information, especially from the US. And I always wanted to write this story in English. So that's when I decided that this was the time to write this book. If you have any questions during the presentation, there's all possibilities to pop a question in the chat or to raise your hand. Otherwise, just leave write down your question, and then at the end we'll have enough time to go over some more questions. Yes? Any questions beforehand? Okay, so let me share my screen. Here we go. And yeah. So I want to open this presentation with a quote by Truus. Truus Menger is the one on the cover with the Sten gun, and the lady in the middle of the bottom. And she said, if you have to make a decision, that decision has to be a right one, and you must always remain human, despite the inhuman circumstances that you might be facing, especially in times of conflict. These are, so this has been recorded, and this is for you if you want to find out more information about me or the book. Two websites, sophieswomenofwar.com, and one especially for the book, Seducing and Killing Nazis.com, and my email address, info@sophieswomenofwar.com. Yeah, so I'm the founder of Sophie's Women of War, in order to shed light on the stories of women, and then especially women leaders who show genuine leadership and can provide positive role models in times of conflict. So in this particular case, World War II. But I've also researched other wars. I've done research in Rwanda, especially with regard to sexual violence during the genocide there. I've been to Bosnia, to Kosovo, and what struck me is that in all these war stories, all these post-conflict areas are being rebuilt by women. And it's exactly these women leaders who would just resist a particular regime and show the courage, but that's not what we hear of in the media. So that's why I really wanted to shed light on these stories. And that's why I founded Sophie's Women of War. Well, I guess Mark already did this introduction. I wish I was here in person because it just looks beautiful on the pictures. But once the pandemic is over, I'm sure I'll come and meet you. So this is a small summary of what I'll go over. Just briefly, World War II, especially in the Netherlands and the city of Haarlem. Who were Hannie, Truus and Freddie? What did their resistance work exactly entail? Why is it still important to remember and to commemorate today? Then I would like to elaborate a little bit on my own personal motivation to share this story and show you where you can find the book. And then finally we'll wrap up with some questions and answers. I think it might be good to do this PowerPoint. There are some photos in the slides as well. But after the PowerPoint, I can have 3 to 5 minutes to run a slideshow with even more pictures. And that's also time for you to think of questions, to get something to drink, to go to the bathroom. And then after the slideshow, we'll be back with questions. And then you have all the time to comment, maybe share your own stories as well. So this is a map of Europe with the Netherlands as this tiny red dot. Compared to US standards, an extremely tiny country. If I would drive 2 hours south, I'm in Belgium from here. If I would drive 2 hours east, I'm in Germany. So very, very small. The Netherlands were occupied by Nazi Germany from May 10th, 1940 until May 5th, 1945, so 5 years. And it is estimated that about 102,000, not 102 million Jews were killed, Dutch Jews. Here you can see a map of the Netherlands, and then you can see where Haarlem is located. So it's very close to the coast and the North Sea, for that matter, and 12 miles west of Amsterdam. It's 15 minutes by train if it weren't for COVID. Here you can see a photo of the main square, the Grote Markt, in Haarlem, when the German troops arrived. And I'm always impressed by this picture because, well, you see all the people standing on the stairs and they're astonished. They have no idea what's exactly happening. Of course, they knew that other countries, other European countries were invaded. But they had the hope that this wouldn't happen to the Netherlands, but it did. So here you see them. Then we're going to go over Hannie Schaft, one of the main characters of the book in this story. Her real name actually was Jannetje Johanna Schaft. And Hannie Schaft, so Hannie was the name that she used later on in the resistance. And that is really the name that she grew famous by. So I will refer to her as Hannie, but her real name was Jannetje Johanna. She was born September 16, 1920. So this September 16, she would have turned 100 if she would have still been alive. And she was born in Haarlem. If you look at the family photo, Hannie is the smallest girl. And then the girl on her left with the little glasses is her sister Annie. And Annie died at the age of 12 from diphtheria, which of course was a very heavy blow for the entire family. And her parents were both teachers. Mother stayed at home with the children once they got a family. And they were very politically engaged and very socially active. So already way before the Nazis occupied the Netherlands, they were already debating what would happen, what happened when Hitler came to power. So they really talked a lot about this topic. Here you can see a portrait of Hannie in 43, so halfway through the war. Hannie was, as a child, a very shy, very modest girl, and she had beautiful red hair and freckles. But red hair was often used for children to get bullied. So she was bullied quite a bit. She was shy, withdrawn, but very good at school, always at the top of her class. And because ideals like justice and peace were so instilled in her from an early age by her parents, she decided to go to law school. So she studied both Dutch and international law at the University of Amsterdam, same university where I went to. And her dream was to work for the League of Nations, which is the predecessor of the United Nations as we know them nowadays, in Geneva, once the war was over. But she had no idea what would happen. Then at around the same time that Hannie grew up, we have the sisters Truus and Freddie Oversteegen. Truus was born on August 29th, 1923 in Schoten. Schoten is now Haarlem. And Freddie Nanda, her little sister, was born on September 6th, 1925, also in Schoten. And here on the picture, you can see I deliberately chose this picture. It's an old picture, so it's very vague and it's wrinkled a little bit, but I liked it because it's so typically Dutch, the girls with their bicycles. And the girl with the bow is Truus, and the smallest girl is Freddie. And here they are on a later age. Freddie on the left and Truus on the right. And they grew up with their mother, Treintje van der Molen. And Treintje was divorced from their father, which was very unique for that time. And Treintje was extremely politically active for the Communist Party. And already in 1934, so that is 6 years before the beginning of the war, they gave shelter to German Jewish refugees. So you had these people coming from Germany, and well, they needed a place to stay. And this family, they lived in a very tiny worker's house. They literally gave up their beds for these people. Then in 39, I should say, the World War II broke out. To go back to Hannie, her first acts of resistance were as soon as Nazi Germany invaded Poland to send parcels to these Polish officers through the International Red Cross. And then, well, in 1940, the Netherlands were invaded as well. And what Hannie Schaft and many other people would do is that they would listen to the illegal radio station Radio Orange. The Dutch government had fled to the United Kingdom, and from London they would broadcast daily news, which was called Radio Orange. Hannie Schaft, but also Treintje van der Molen and Truus and Freddie, they would print and transport illegal newspapers. And on the picture, you can see an old stencil machine from Truus and Freddie. And according to Truus, it was a very big, heavy machine, and it made a lot of noise. So later on, Truus and Freddie got a little stepbrother, Robbie, and once they were printing these newspapers, Robbie had to be on the lookout and shout "Mama" if someone suspicious or a German soldier would arrive, so that no one would discover this machine and the newspapers. So those were the first acts of resistance, you can say. These are some pictures to give you an idea of World War II. The sign for Joden verboden means no Jews allowed. Well, the German, the Nazi swastika, food stamps, and then people waiting in line to get food, because it was all stamped and everybody got small portions of food. Hannie Schaft, when she was studying law in Amsterdam, one of the things that she would do is that she would go into all kinds of public areas like theaters and bars and swimming pools, and then she would steal identification papers that the resistance would forge, because Jewish citizens had, as you can see in the photo, a J from Jew in their papers, and they had to carry that with them all the time. So you can imagine that if these people wanted to go in hiding, they needed false identification papers to go out on the streets. So there was a huge demand for these false papers. And in order to do that, Hannie would steal real papers in order to falsify them. But then at one point through the war, Hannie said, well, this is just not enough. I want to do more. I want to offer more resistance, and if necessary, with weapons. So in the summer of 43, she registered with the Council of Resistance, the RVV. And the RVV, or Council of Resistance, was a local resistance group that offered armed resistance. It consisted of a cell of approximately 7 members, and the photo that you can see here is a recent photo of their the building where they had their headquarters. Well, of course, not everybody is suitable to join the armed resistance. So Hannie's first assignment was to shoot a particular guy from the Gestapo. So we don't have guns here in the Netherlands, but she got a gun. She had weapon training in the woods in the nearby Haarlemmerhout. And her first assignment was to shoot a guy from the Gestapo. So of course she was extremely nervous, really scared. But at the moment of truth, she pulled her gun and she pulled the trigger. But instead of a shot, a click was heard. The gun was not loaded. And well, of course, she was extremely relieved that she hadn't actually shot a particular person. She was scared, she was confused, she didn't know, and the so-called Gestapo guy, he turned around and he introduced himself as Frans van der Wiel, the commander of the RVV. So it all had appeared to be a test. Well, she was furious that she had gone through all these emotions, And she started crying from just, she wanted to release tension, and she was angry, but she had brilliantly passed the test. So that's when the commander knew that she could join the group. And then her first real assignment was to meet up with Truus and Freddie Oversteegen, because they had already joined the RVV in 41. But Truus and Freddie, they had already carried out some actions through the RVV in Haarlem, and they were wanted in the area. So they had fled to the eastern part of the country, to Enschede, actually close to the German border, where their aunt worked in a hospital. So they would just disguise themselves as nurses and work there for a while. And then Hannie's assignment was to meet these girls there in that particular hospital. But yeah, the situation was extremely. There was a lot of tension in the air. The three girls were there at the hospital. One of the directors gave the office to the girls, so they had some privacy. But the three girls, they were really young girls. I mean, Hannie was 19 at the beginning of the war, Truus 16, and Freddie only 14. So they were really these teenagers, and they were sitting on this table, but they didn't trust each other at all. I mean, they had learned not to trust other people. And then, well, there was a lot of tension in the air, but then after a few security checks, they discovered that, yes, okay, indeed, they could rely on each other, and that the same commander had sent these girls to meet. I remember Truus telling me the story that she had her gun ready. All three girls had their guns ready because they didn't trust the other women. And then as soon as they found out that they could trust each other, they put their guns on the table and they just started laughing like only teenage girls can. Of course, that was also a release of all the tension, but it was just something that, was a really strange situation for all three. And a special bond grew from there. They were three women from completely different backgrounds. Hannie was the intellectual, the student. Truus was a bit of a tomboy, but a natural leader. And Freddie, she was still very young, but very feminine and very fierce. So completely different characters, completely different backgrounds, but they made a fantastic team together. So within the RVV, the three girls would work to get together quite a bit. Well, what did their resistance work entail? One of the things is that they would provide Jewish children with safe houses. So they would bring these girls or children from one house to another. Because they were women, it wasn't very suspicious if you would see a woman on the street with a child. It was mainly Hannie and Truus who did this because Freddie was, well, she was really young herself and often wearing her hair in braids, so she looked even younger than she was, and she had very dark features. If you would judge it by the stereotypical Jewish features, and because she was so young, people could easily think that Freddie was a Jewish child herself. So that is really something that they wanted to avoid, because then she would be in danger. So it was mainly Truus and Hannie who would transport the children. And then, but at one point also Hannie indicated that these children, of course, it was extremely important work, but she said she had told Truus that it was way too emotional for her, that she really preferred to fight. So one of the other things they did was sabotage. They would attack and bomb railways, for example. Truus particular really liked that job, because of course there's no people involved directly, but you can still do a lot of damage. And they would map the coastal defenses, because you could have seen on the map that we're close to the coast. Well, they had to make sure that they could map all the defense works of the Nazis. So Truus was an artist. She could draw very well. They would go there, flirt and giggle a little bit, talk to these guys, and in the meantime make sketches that the resistance could use later on. And one of the most famous thing that that we know these three girls, hence the title of my book, is that they would use their female youth and beauty as a secret weapon. So they would dress up as Muffin Girls, is how we call them. You would say crowd girls. Crowd comes from the German sauerkraut. And these Muffin Girls were women who had relationships or alleged relationships with German officers or soldiers. So they would dress up with lots of makeup, and they had a great laugh about this at the same time, because Truus was a really tomboy. She had never worn makeup before. And Freddie later told me that Frans van der Wiel, the commander, he would do their makeup with like bright red lipstick, and she said we looked hideous. So yeah, they were nervous, of course, and but they would dress up. Then they would go into bars, talk to these Nazi officers, flirt with them, and tell them, you know, close by there is this the city forest of the Haarlemmerhout. Do you want to go for a romantic stroll? So they would get these guys out of the bars, take them to the woods, like really lure them into the woods, where then one of the male members of the group would be waiting and would shoot this Nazi target. And later on, the girls themselves would shoot these targets. So literally seducing and killing Nazis. Yeah, so that's why I also chose the title for this book. The majority of cases was without the seducing part, but I think that this is because they were women. This is really something that they had way different from their male counterparts. So that's why I really wanted to stress it. And of course, the Nazis had no idea, so they could really use this. Yeah, they carried out quite a few liquidations, as they called it, which is a nice word for killing. Here you can see Truus with the Sten gun. This picture is taken just after the end of the war, because otherwise, of course, you wouldn't have been able to stand out in the open, smiling, even posing for this picture. But it was the weapon that she had used. And you see the gun of Hannie Schaft on the right. And often they would ride their bicycles. They would always go in pairs. And sometimes also with the male members on their bicycles and follow a particular target, and then they would always ask, "Are you really such and such?" And they really needed the confirmation that this was really the person that they were after. And if that was confirmed, they would shoot this person either from their bicycle, or they would walk and shoot and then take their bicycles to get out and escape. So, and it's funny that Truus after the war, she was would go to schools and tell her story quite a bit to people. And she always said, well, the first question that children would ask is, how many people did you shoot? We don't know. They never revealed how many people, Nazi targets, they would kill. You can read in my book the people that I could find, like more sources that would confirm these liquidations, but they would never reveal the exact number. And well, Truus, I think correctly always said, well, it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. It's already bad enough that we had to do what we did. And then it really doesn't matter how many. And Freddie was always very fierce if she would get a question like that, and she would say, well, we were soldiers. You don't ask a soldier that question. Well, of course, it was extremely dangerous what these women did, so they would have to disguise themselves. Here you can see a photo of Truus, who's dressed up as a man with the hat, and Hannie, who had to dye her beautiful red hair black at one point, and she wore glasses made out of window glass, not in order not to get recognized. And all three girls had to move from one safe house to the other. So I think Truus at one point said that she moved. I think she had lived in 50 more than 50 addresses, and she joked about that. She said, "Well, I could almost have been Jewish because she had to move so many times." Well, it was extremely dangerous, and especially the winter of '44 was very horrible winter. People were starving, literally. There was no food. It was extremely cold. Well, people after 4.5 years of war, they just didn't really see the end. One of the guys that Hannie Schaft had worked with, Jan Bonenkamp, who was from a different resistance group, he had died during one of the missions that they had been on, and that really had a huge impact on Hannie Schaft, of course. She was depressed, but it also made her more, she just really wanted to go out there and end this war, and really wanted to fight even more. So they took up mission after mission, but then in the spring of '45, on March 21st, she got arrested because she had illegal newspapers with her on her bicycle, in the backs of her bicycle. So she was just stopped at a routine checkpoint, had to open her bags, and the Germans discovered these newspapers. So of course, well, she was arrested, but the Germans had no idea at the time who she really was. Only when she was brought in for questioning, they found her gun in her handbag. And then they saw the roots of her red hair coming through the black hair. And then they knew that this was the girl, the famous girl with the red hair that they've been looking for so long. So yeah, then she was brought to a particular prison in Amsterdam on the Amstelveense Weg, and that's where you can see this photo that's taken of her. She knows it's the end. She doesn't know what's going to happen exactly, but you can see her fist and how tense she is. And yeah, she knows that this is can be good. On the same day, actually, Freddie was arrested as well. Also just at a routine checkpoint. And she had her gun with her, well, like Hannie Schaft, and they were not, the resistance group always told them not to carry the gun if they were not out on a mission, because that would be too dangerous. So Freddie got arrested, got really scared because she thought, oh, I have my gun with me, and what if they discover that? But then she talked to the German. She was asked for her ID. And then she replied in German, habe ich nicht. Ich bin noch kein 15 Jahre, which means I don't have any ID because I haven't turned 15 yet. Well, at the time, Freddie was 19, but because she looked so much younger, the German believed her and let her go. So she was really lucky that she just got released like that, but Hannie did not. Hannie was in prison cell, and on April 17, 45, she was taken out of her cell, pushed into a car, driven to the dunes in Overveen, so very close to the sea. And within the dunes, she was executed by the Nazis. So this is really sad, especially if you come to think that it wasn't even 3 weeks before the end of the war, because the Netherlands were liberated on May 5th. And well, of course, both allies and Nazis knew that the war was about to end, and they had agreements not to shoot anyone, in particular women, but both parties didn't stick to that. And yeah, that was fatal for Hannie, unfortunately. Here you can see her gravestone, as it is nowadays. So yeah, Hannie Schaft was reburied. You can see that on the left, the picture on the left, reburied on November 27, 1945. On the honorary cemetery in Overveen, so where you also saw the previous picture, in presence of the Queen. Yes, we have a monarchy. We have a king now, but we have had a queen back then. And there is there's like 372 men and only one woman, and that is Hannie Schaft. So that was her reburial. Hannie did not survive the war. However, Truus and Freddie did. They lived long lives. They survived the war, but were haunted by the demons of their past for the rest of their lives. You could say they were, of course, they were heroines as we would see them now, but at the same time, yeah, they were human, and they were really suffering from their resistance work, and they were really they had extreme nightmares, especially around 4th and 5th of May. 4th of May is our commemoration, National Commemoration Day. 5th Liberation Day. So they always had these nightmares. They suffered from depression, from what we would nowadays call PTSD, and that's probably also Honey probably also suffered from that during the war and right before she was arrested. So yeah, Truus and Freddie always lived with the past, and both women had completely different ways of dealing with their experiences. Truus was a very outgoing person. She would talk to children at schools. She was an artist. She became a sculptor mostly, and here you can see one of her sculptures. It's called Woman in Resistance, and it's depicting Honeyscraft. It's in one of the parks here in Haarlem, and each year on the last Sunday of November, because of the reburial that was at the end of November, there is an annual national commemoration for Honeyscraft, so around this statue. Truus, yeah, she traveled all over the world, and she went to Srebrenica, the women Srebrenica in Bosnia. She met Mandela, and she was always on the road and very outgoing, whereas Freddie was very reserved, very withdrawn, and really focused on her family. Truus got 4 children, Freddie 3. But Freddie, well, she would hardly ever talk about the war and really focus on her family. And then exactly during the time of all the May commemoration services, she would literally flee the country in a van with her family, just to literally take distance from this and not to get the memories. However, she still had the nightmares. So yeah, every year in November there's the Honeyscraft commemoration. Here you can see this was in 2003. You can see both sisters with me. I knew both sisters for 20 years. The reason I met Truus for the first time when I was 16. I was in high school, and for my history class, I had to write a research report on a self-chosen topic. And for me, that topic was very obvious, Honeyscraft. Honeyscraft was the icon of female Dutch resistance, an icon like Anne Frank. And she was from the exact same city, roughly the same age as I was. But of course, I grew up under completely different circumstances. But I was very curious what exactly happened here, and what would I have done if I would have been in Honeyscraft's shoes. So I took it very serious, and then through a friend of my father, I discovered that Truus was still alive, got her contact details, and just called her up for an interview. And Truus was so kind to invite me over, and yeah, I was immediately impressed with her. I mean, she could have easily been my grandma. She was giving me tea, feeding me cookies. But I so remember when I just entered her house, and when I shook her hand, I thought, wow, this is the same hand that she used to actually kill Nazis. So it was really double. I was really intrigued from the very beginning. And she saw how dedicated I was to this subject and how serious I was. So she really trusted me with her story. And yeah, because I was the future generation for her, also to pass on this story. So a bond grew immediately from there. So Truus introduced me to her sister Freddie, and they asked me to be the speaker at their commemoration, the national commemoration service in 1998. So I did that when I was 17. And then after that, I joined the board of the National Honeyscraft Foundation. And both Truus and Freddie were board members. I think I was in the board with them for more than 10 years. And a really close friendship next to the board arose between us. And yeah, like I said, Truus was very open. Freddie was not in the beginning, but when her husband passed away, she started opening up a little bit. And her husband also wanted to protect her and shield her off from all the bad memories. So that was also one of the reasons why she didn't talk as much. So when the husband passed away, she would start opening up a little bit. Yeah, so I still had these recordings from what both sisters said. So that's what I used in my book. I only used firsthand witnesses. So it's a very it's not a novel, it's nonfiction, and it's yeah, I just try to stay as close to the facts as possible. And I also interviewed some of the male members of their resistance group when they were still alive. Sadly enough, no one of their group is alive anymore. But yeah, both Oversteegen sisters, they survived the war, but they, strangely enough, they really had to fight for recognition for what they had done. And that, especially right after the war, their work was not really recognized at all. And that had two reasons. First of all, because the RVV, the Council of Resistance, where they belonged to, was not in itself a communist group, but they had communist members. And well, Truus and Freddie came from a communist background, or at least their mother was a member of the Communist Party. So that was very sensitive, of course, during Cold War, and really something that was swept under the carpet. Another reason was because they were women. Especially Freddie was extremely fierce about this, that she remembered that it was Freddie who would get or receive an award from our queen, not for herself, but for Honeyscraft. So posthumous, she would get an award. Freddie and Truus did not receive anything. And then the queen just came up to Freddie and gave her a box with this award. And then the queen came back and she said, "Oh, sorry, I gave you the wrong box. I gave you the big award, but the big award is for the men. You need a small award." So that was really something that Freddie would be just furious about. And to this day, the role of women in war, in armed conflict, is really underrepresented or neglected. So now these women have been recognized, but there's still others and some stories that we don't even know of. And then here, this photo is in 14 were our Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Finally, they received a medal, a War Distinction Cross. And Truus, even on her old age, she was always she had a lot of humor. So she just did like this with her elbow and she said, "Hey, Mark, you are really kind of late." And yeah, it was very important for both women, especially for Freddie. Truus had received some awards in the past, but Freddie never had. She was always the smaller sister. And now she had received this award. So this was, 2014. Truus passed away in 2016 and Freddie in 2018, so almost 2 years ago, one day before her birthday. The reason I wanted to share this story with you is because, well, first of all, the people actually lived through the war. They're dying, and knowledge of World War II is fading. And at the same time, we see an increase in Holocaust deniers and anti-Semitism. Thirdly, the role of women is still neglected or underrepresented. So this all together makes that I really wanted to share this story with the world and with you. So thank you very much for listening. So yeah, what I suggest now is that I will open the slideshow. You can get something to drink, go to the bathroom, and then we'll be back for questions. What do you think, Mark?
Well, or people know that they can type in a question right now. Sophie, that was fabulous. That was amazing.
Thank you.
When, as you're listening to this, you meet Truus, you meet Freddie. You're a teenage girl. I'm sure your mouth must have hit the floor, as you're listening to some of the stories. But in 1945 and shortly thereafter, first of all, did people in Harlem, they didn't know that they were resistance fighters, I'm assuming, just to keep their identity clear. But when did it become known that they had been in the resistance? And also, I'm as part of that, if they didn't know they were in the resistance, but the townspeople see them flirting with Nazis, did they think they were collaborators at the time? In 1943 and 1944, was the townspeople's impressions of them not very favorable?
Well, yeah, obviously that was the role they had to play, also to be believable, to be trustworthy. Also, otherwise these Nazis would never have trusted them. But of course, I mean, the other Dutch people, they did not want to do anything to do with them. Of course, they would always dress up differently, and so it's not like they would be they would go to these famous bar where only these Nazi officers were present, and the regular people wouldn't go to bars. It was too expensive. And they would definitely not go to a bar with collaborators and Germans. But yeah, obviously the Dutch people they did not want to do anything with them. No. As Muffin Girls, but that was of course only a short period of time. Yeah.
Right. And they obviously got in early on this, and their mother's influence must have been incredible, because if they're giving shelter to German Jews in 1934, this is the beginning of the Nazi regime, that they're helping out Polish officers in 1939. They literally got in on the entry level, So
Yeah.
How widespread was the RVV? How many people actually participated in that? Do you know?
In the RVV itself, it was a small group, seven people. Yeah.
Okay, but across, did they have other satellites across the country? I mean,
Yeah, well, but the resistance, of course, there was not much communication, not like we have today. So the resistance would exist of all small local groups. And it just started out usually with these men who just, I don't know, wanted to do something and they had no idea what exactly. So it took a while before there was some organization within the local groups. And then at the end, I think in 44, there was one, the BS, which was like the some kind of united bigger organization that would tackle all the resistance groups. But yeah, communication was slow at the times, and they would still operate as local units. Yeah.
how many people were living in Harlem during the war? What was the population, and how many? Um, what was the population of occupiers? How many Nazis were in the city as well?
Ooh, that's actually a very good question. To be honest, I cannot tell you exactly how many Nazis. I think there was around 100,000 people living in the town of Haarlem. How many Nazis? I mean, I can't really give you that number. Of course, there were the German soldiers that occupied. But the Truus and Freddie and Hannie did not only kill the German Nazi, but also Dutch traders who would become members of the Nazi Party, of course. And well, if you think that around 90% of the entire Dutch population just tried to live their lives as normal as possible.
You know, if I'm down hard or something that would.
Oh, I can hear something else. And then 5% collaborated, so worked together with the Nazis, and then another 5% joined the resistance. But the resistance is very big definition. Of that 5%, there was only a very small percentage that would join the armed resistance. And of the armed resistance, there was literally only a handful of women. So I only know around 5, 6 women in the armed resistance in like the entire country.
People are typing in their questions. I'm gonna read them for. Did the Nazis take retribution for the killings of by hanging or deporting townspeople? I mean, when they found somebody dead in that town, how did they take it out on the townspeople?
Yes. Unfortunately, there were retaliations, and that is also what made it extremely difficult for these people to for Truus and Freddie and Hannie to really they knew that if they would kill some of the high-ranking Nazi officers, they knew that for example 10 resistance fighters or just random people in the street would be killed in response. It did stop them because they said, well, if we don't do this, then who knows how many people will be killed and how many Jews will be deported. But yeah, I mean, of course they felt horrible about this, but they knew this was happening. Yeah.
Were the seductions happening in Harlem, or was it where their aunt lived?
No, it's all in Haarlem. All the resistance work was in Haarlem. Where their aunt was in the Eastern Party, that's where they met briefly, and then they would all go back to Haarlem. Yeah.
Were you able to find or interview any of Truus or Freddie's children?
Yeah, I'm in close contact with all of them still. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And I'm especially close to one of Truus's daughters. The eldest daughter is called Hannie, after Hannie Schaft. And yeah, she looks exactly like Truus now. And yeah, also Freddie's children. And in the beginning, I felt it was a little bit weird because, well, Truus had been very open about her war experiences with her children, but Freddie was not. So in the beginning, I knew more about Freddie than her own children, which was a bit weird. But yeah, I have a really good connection, and her son told me, like, Sophie, I learned so much from your book about my own mother. So yeah, that's very special. I can't hear you. Are you speaking, Mark? No. Mark, I don't know if there's some. Are you muted? No. Yeah.
This is Roseanne. I work at the museum too. He was
Hi.
hi. He was having an issue yesterday with the microphone.
Okay, I was like, if you
Okay.
maybe.
So let me Mark, can you hear me? Shake your head. Okay. I'll ask the next question. Hold on. Did the resistance, the three of them, know about the Allied landings at Normandy, and where the Allied troops were moving to? Did they know, like, that they had landed and where they were going?
Yes, they knew. Of course, they would still be listening to also the BBC, the Radio Orange. That was all the news that was coming from London. So they knew about D-Day. And that, well, they had a little bit of a double feeling. There's still a letter from Hannie Schaft to one of her Jewish friends, Philine Polak. And she writes that everybody's in a party mood because of the D-Day, and everybody thinks the war will be over soon. But that was about the same time that she lost one of her fellow resistance guys, buddies. So Hannie was really depressed, and she couldn't really see the end of the war. She was right, unfortunately, that it was still a long way for the country to be liberated, and then she didn't even get to the end. So yeah, they knew through the Radio Orange. And what was your second question?
And after it was all over, did they feel like they had made a difference?
Yes, Truus and Freddie definitely, and I think that's what they always said. You know, if they were very modest about it. They didn't see themselves as heroines at all, of course, because they were also traumatized. But they were very strong about their morals, and they said, well, we did what we had to do. Someone had to do it, and we just had to do this. I mean, there was no other option for them. They kept repeating that also to justify it for themselves, I think. But yeah, they really thought that they made a difference, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I think that's all the questions that we have, Sophie. And oh, one just popped up. Yep. Get everyone saying thank you. It was excellent, and they enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. Mark, I can still not hear you.
Yeah, you can't hear you, Mark.
Oh yeah, I scrolled down. This was actually the very last picture of this is Paul Elsinga. He was like the last 6 months of Hannie, when Hannie was still alive, she was living with his parents. So Paul was 10 at the time, so he knew Hannie Schaft and Truus, because Truus was also hiding with his family. And Paul is the only person who's still alive who actually knew all three women. So I got him a copy of the book. And yeah,
Very nice.
Yeah.
I guess one more. Did they have survivor's guilt that made and others did not? Like, was there a survivor's guilt where other people, you know, died?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. And that's when I first met Truus and Freddie, I was a teenager and I saw them. I was like, wow, these are these heroines. They did the right thing and they were fantastic. And then later on, when I got older, I talked to them and I discovered that they were human. That indeed they felt guilty that they survived, and their friend Honey did not, and so many others did not.
Yeah.
And that they were traumatized. The war really ended for both Truus and Freddie the day they died. So that's really also an element that I wanted to stress in the book, that I have no idea what I would have done if I were in their situation. Luckily, I never have been, and I hope I never will be.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have had a very strong moral compass, but at the same time, they were haunted by their experiences. Yeah.
I mean, they were so young, you know.
Yeah, extremely young, and they were completely deprived of their youth. Yeah.
But someone asked, is there any way we can, Mark, will you have the slideshow? Just shake your head after this.
I can send it to you, sure.
Oh, thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you, because I think people, they want to see the pictures. So
Yeah, yes, of course.
great, Sophie. Well,
Yeah.
I don't think we have any more questions, but we thank you very much.
Yeah.
And Mark says he thanks you with a big wave.
Yeah, well, thank you. It was an honor to me. It's always a bit different through Zoom, just staring at your webcam instead of an audience. I would have loved to have met you in person, but maybe someday I will.
We hope.
And
That would be good.
yeah, the book is available in hard copy, but also ebook and audio book. And you have your local bookshop.
Oh, it's going to be at 8 Cousins, Mark. Shake your head.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody, the book can be purchased at 8 Cousins. I would think it would be a very interesting read. Again, we thank you so much, Sophie.
Well, thank you.
And a lot of interesting, information. Thank you so much. Sorry, Mark, I jumped in for you, but anyways, everybody have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much.
We'll somehow get that slideshow out to the participants.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you. Bye.